I never thought I'd get tongue-tied in a language exchange, but there I was, trying to ask my coffee order without sounding like a total idiot, and failing spectacularly. That's how I met him, Alex, my language exchange partner who was supposed to help me get better at French. Except, somehow, it felt like we were speaking a whole different language altogether, one that wasn't in any app or textbook. I'm Mike, by the way. I moved to Paris for work a few months ago. Graphic design, nothing glamorous, but enough to keep me busy. My French was embarrassingly basic when I arrived, so I signed up on this app for language exchange partners, hoping to work on my conversational skills. Alex popped up in my matches with a message that said something like, "Let's help each other not sound like tourists." Clever, right? He was a native French speaker learning English. Our first meeting was at a tiny café tucked away near the Canal Saint-Martin, the kind of place where the chairs are mismatched and the barista calls you mon ami like you're an old friend. I was nervous but excited, trying to remember how to order something other than "un café, s'il vous plaît." When Alex arrived, he was exactly what I pictured, tall, with that effortlessly messy dark hair, and a smile that was just a little too easy for a stranger. We started with the usual stuff, names, hobbies, embarrassing mistakes with the language, but pretty quickly, the usual awkwardness faded. It was like we were syncing up, the way he laughed at my terrible accent, how his eyes crinkled at the corners. It was disarming, but what really caught me off guard was the way he looked at me when I wasn't expecting it. Not in a "wow, you're cute" way, but more like an unspoken question, like his body was saying something his words weren't. As weeks passed, our language exchanges became more than just drills with vocabulary and grammar. We started meeting at different cafes, sometimes at the park, sometimes just for a walk along the Seine. Each time, I noticed little things. The way he'd lean in when I struggled to find the right word, how his fingers would brush against mine by accident, or maybe not by accident, and the way his smile would falter when conversation lagged. One night, after a long session trying to untangle some idioms I could barely understand, we ended up sitting on the steps outside a closed bookstore. The streetlights cast this soft glow, and the city sounded quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. We were both tired, but neither of us wanted to leave. That's when the silence between us felt heavier than all the French words I'd learned combined. Our body language was saying something urgent, something words hadn't dared to touch yet, but neither of us spoke it aloud. I remember thinking, what happens when your language partner becomes so much more than that? When the thing you're trying to learn isn't just a language, but how to read the unspoken, how to understand someone without words. I wish I could say that I had a perfect line ready to break the silence that night, but I didn't. All I knew was that the usual rules of conversation didn't apply anymore. And honestly, neither did I. So yeah, that was the beginning of it. This start of something that neither of us saw coming. And maybe the most confusing language I've ever tried to learn. We sat there for a while longer, the silence stretching between us like a tightrope. The sounds of the city felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else's world. I wanted to say something, anything that would crack the tension, but my throat felt dry and my mind scrambled for the right words in either language. Finally, Alex broke the silence. He shifted on the step, running a hand through his hair like he was trying to gather his thoughts. "Mike, do you ever feel like sometimes words just get in the way?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, I guess. Like when you want to say something but it feels too complicated." He smiled, that easy, half smile that made my stomach do a weird flip. Exactly. Sometimes I think body language is more honest, or maybe less risky. Less risky, I repeated, trying to make sense of what he meant, because words can mess things up. He nodded, eyes fixed somewhere across the street, as if the answer was waiting there. Sometimes I want to say more than just, "I'm learning English," or "You speak good French," but I don't know how. Well, that was new. Here we were, two guys from different worlds, bumbling through language lessons, and suddenly the conversation had veered somewhere complicated and thrilling. I felt my heartbeat pick up, my mind racing through every possible response. Then, mostly on impulse, I reached out and lightly tapped his hand. His eyes met mine, wide and a little startled, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he squeezed my hand gently and said, "Maybe we're already saying some things without words." I smiled, the nervous kind that felt like it might just turn into something bolder if I let it. Yeah, I think so too. From that night on, our meeting shifted. The language practice was still there, because I needed it, and he probably enjoyed being the teacher, but it was no longer the main focus. We'd sit closer, our hands brushing more often, sharing stories about our lives, our hopes, and sometimes our fears. I learned that Alex had moved to Paris a few years earlier from Lyon, chasing a dream to be a photographer. He was passionate but cautious, someone who didn't open up easily, which made the moments he did all the more special. One rainy afternoon, we decided to escape the drizzle and ducked into a tiny bookstore I hadn't noticed before. The smell of old paper and coffee hit me instantly, my kind of place. We wandered the aisles, pointing out books in each other's languages, laughing at how weird some translations were. At one point, Alex pulled out a battered French poetry book and read a few lines aloud. I didn't understand every word, but the way he spoke, the softness in his voice, made it sound beautiful. When he looked up, his expression was vulnerable, like he was sharing a secret. "That's what I mean," he said quietly. "Sometimes it's not about the words themselves, but the feeling behind them." I nodded, my heart quietly agreeing. I was falling for this guy, who was supposed to be just my language partner. Then came the night of the Christmas market. We met beneath the twinkling lights, the air thick with the scent of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon. The market was crowded, people bundled in scarves and laughter, but somehow it felt intimate. We walked side by side, our arms occasionally brushing, sending sparks that I could no longer pretend were accidental. Alex stopped at a stall selling handmade ornaments. He picked up a tiny glass heart and held it out to me. "For you," he said, his voice low. I took it, my fingers trembling. "Why?" "Because you're important, and it's easier to give a heart than to say it." I swallowed hard, the weight of that simple gift settling deep. "Alex, He cut me off with a soft laugh. "Don't worry. No need for words if you don't want to." But I wanted to, more than anything. We found a quiet corner away from the crowd, and there, under the glow of fairy lights, I finally took the leap.
"I like you."
More than just as a language partner. His smile was shy but real. Me too. That moment was a mess of nervous energy and relief, like the whole city had paused just for us. We didn't rush into anything, but from then on, our conversations, even the awkward fumbling ones, were charged with something new. Looking back, I realize how strange it is that love often starts with unspoken words and hesitant glances, especially when you're supposed to be learning how to speak. But maybe that's the best language of all, the one your heart already knows how to speak, even when your mouth can't catch up. And with Alex, I'm still learning every day. Not just French, but how to read between the lines, how to listen to the silences, and how to say what really matters without saying anything at all. After that night at the Christmas market, things between Alex and me felt like they were shifting into a new rhythm. Like a song that had been playing quietly in the background suddenly got its own beat. We weren't just language partners anymore. We were learning how to be something else, something more. But honestly, I was still figuring out what that else looked like. For a while, we kept meeting as usual. Cafes, walks by the Seine, those quiet corners in bookstores. But now there was this undercurrent of wanting to close the space between us a little more each time. Maybe it was the way his hand found mine without me needing to ask, or how our goodbyes lasted longer than necessary, neither of us quite ready to break the moment. One evening, a couple of weeks later, we met at a small jazz bar near Bastille. It was dim and cozy, the kind of place where conversations felt like secrets shared. Alex had warned me that the French jazz scene was something I needed to experience, and I trusted him. We squeezed into a corner booth, the hum of the saxophone wrapping around us. At one point, he reached across the table and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. It was such a small gesture, but electric, like an unspoken promise. I caught his eye and found him watching me with that same quiet curiosity I'd seen since day one. "Mike," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the music. "How do you say, 'I want to be brave,' in French?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Je veux être courageux." "Why?" He shrugged but didn't look away. "Because sometimes I want to tell you things, but I'm scared." I swallowed, feeling my own nerves bubble up. Like what? He hesitated, then smiled a little. Like that I think about you a lot when we're not together. Or that I want to see where this goes. God, my heart was doing somersaults. I reached for his hand again, this time holding it firmly. I want that too. From there, the conversation was messy but honest, filled with stutters and half-finished sentences. We were both learning a new language, one of feelings and vulnerability. And it wasn't easy. But somehow, it felt right. A few days after that night, I invited Alex over to my tiny apartment. I'd cooked a simple dinner, pasta with a sauce I'd barely managed to follow a recipe for. When he arrived, he brought a bottle of wine, and that crooked smile that always made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We ate, talked, and laughed, and when the wine was gone, the music low, I found myself inching closer. The moment was quiet, but charged, the kind that makes your skin tingle and your breath catch. Can I kiss you? I asked, nervous but hopeful. He nodded, and when our lips met, it was like something unlocked. A gentle, slow connection that felt like both a question and an answer at the same time. After that, the weeks blurred into a wonderful mess of dates, stolen kisses on rainy sidewalks, and late-night talks where we traded dreams and fears in a mix of French, English, and a growing language of our own. But of course, it wasn't all perfect. There were moments when the differences between us showed up, the cultural nuances, the language barriers, the fears about where this could go. One afternoon, after a misunderstanding about a message he sent in French that I completely misread, we ended up sitting across from each other in a park, the tension thick. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable," Alex said quietly, his eyes searching mine. I shook my head. "No, I'm the one who messed up. I guess sometimes I get scared that I'm not enough. Or that this won't work because we come from different worlds." He reached out, his fingers tracing the back of my hand. "Mike, I don't care about that. I care about you." It was the kind of reassurance I hadn't realized I needed so badly. One Sunday, we took a trip to Montmartre. The wind was crisp, the city stretched out below us like a painting, and Alex held my hand as we wandered through the cobbled streets. We stopped at a little art gallery where he showed me some of his photographs. His eyes lit up as he talked about the stories behind each picture, and I realized how much I wanted to be part of that world he was creating. That day, under a sky streaked with the soft gold of sunset, he pulled me close and whispered, "You've changed my Paris. I don't want this to be just a chapter." I looked up into his eyes, feeling the weight and warmth of what he said. Me neither. Sometimes I still mess up French words or forget what to say, but with Alex, it feels less important. We're figuring out how to communicate beyond mistakes and awkward pauses. It's in the way he looks at me when I'm distracted, the way he remembers my favorite coffee order, the way our fingers intertwine on those quiet moments. I guess what I'm trying to say is that language isn't just about words. It's about connection, the kind that sneaks up on you when you least expect it and makes everything else fall into place. With Alex, I'm learning that the most important conversations might be the ones where words aren't enough. And that's probably the best lesson I've ever gotten. Because sometimes, the body language says what your heart can't quite put into words yet. And sometimes, that's more than enough. As the days turned into months, our little language exchange turned into the best part of my routine. It was weird how something that started as a way to fix my broken French had become this whole other thing, something that felt like the beginning of a story neither of us knew how to write, but were desperate to keep going. One chilly evening in early spring, Alex texted me out of the blue, asking if I wanted to check out a new exhibition at the Pompidou. I said yes without hesitation, already picturing us wandering through art and getting lost in the chaos of modern sculptures and bright colors. I put on my jacket, grabbed my scarf, and headed out, heart buzzing with a mix of excitement and nerves. When I met him outside the museum, he was waiting with that familiar smile, the one that never failed to make me grin back. We bought tickets and went inside, the hum of people and the unexpected bursts of color making everything feel alive. As we moved through the galleries, Alex explained the pieces in French, sometimes stopping to translate, sometimes just letting me feel the art without words. At one point, we found ourselves in front of a massive abstract painting, a wild explosion of reds and blues and chaotic lines. I squinted, trying to make sense of it, and Alex leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Sometimes art doesn't need to be understood," he said softly. "Just felt." I nodded, feeling that same strange connection I'd come to recognize between us. It wasn't about perfect translation or flawless conversation anymore. It was about feeling something deeper, and the way our hands found each other in the dim light, fingers curling together like they'd always been meant to. Later, as we stood outside the museum under the starless sky, Alex looked at me like he wanted to say something important. I felt my pulse quicken, wondering if I was imagining it or if this was one of those moments. "Mike," he started, hesitating just a bit. "I've been thinking about us. About what this means." I swallowed, suddenly nervous. "Yeah." He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "I don't want this to be just a phase or something temporary. I want us to be more than just partners in language or evenings out. I want us to be a team." His words hit me harder than I expected. I'd been caught up in the thrill and the uncertainty, but hearing him say it out loud made everything feel more real, more possible. "I want that too," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We stood there for a moment, the city humming around us, and then he reached up to brush his thumb across my cheek. The touch was gentle, but it sent a surge of warmth through me. "Maybe," he said with a small smile, "we're finally learning the same language." A few days after that night, Alex and I had one of our usual language sessions at a small café near my place. But this time, the conversation drifted away from French vocabulary and irregular verbs and landed on the topic of future plans. "I'm thinking about moving," he said suddenly, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. I looked up, surprised. "Moving? Where?" "To another city. Lyon, maybe. Closer to my family." I felt my heart drop a bit. Lyon was hundreds of miles away, and the thought of him leaving tangled with the growing feelings I had for him. "You're serious?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded. "Yeah, it's complicated. I miss home sometimes. But I don't want to lose what we have." I felt torn. Part of me wanted to tell him to stay, to make Paris the city where we figured this out. But another part knew that love isn't about holding on too tight. It's about trust, about letting the other person find their way, even if it means stepping back. "Alex," I said finally, "I want to support you, whatever you decide, but I'm not ready to say goodbye." He reached across the table, his hand finding mine again. "Then let's not. Let's see where this goes, one day at a time." We both smiled, and in that moment, I realized how much we'd come to depend on each other, not just for language lessons or shared laughter, but for something deeper. We were learning how to navigate uncertainty, how to build something fragile but real. Over the next few weeks, we talked more about his plans, about what moving would mean for us. Sometimes I caught myself imagining life without him nearby, and it hurt. But then I reminded myself that this wasn't just about distance or geography. It was about the connection we'd built, and how it could survive if we were both willing to try. One rainy afternoon, after a long language session filled with more teasing than actual practice, Alex surprised me by pulling me close in the middle of the cafe. His lips found mine without hesitation, soft and sure. The world around us faded away, the clinking of cups, the murmur of other patrons, and all I could feel was the steady warmth of him. When we pulled apart, breathless, he whispered, "No matter where I go, this," he gestured between us, "is real." I smiled, feeling something I couldn't quite put into words. Maybe this was the language we'd been learning all along, one spoken with touch and trust and quiet promises. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to carry us through whatever came next. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope between excitement and uncertainty. Alex's plans to move to Lyon were becoming more real, and every conversation about it carried that bittersweet mix of hope and fear. We both knew things were changing, but neither of us wanted to put an expiration date on what was blossoming between us. One Friday evening, after work, I invited Alex over to my apartment. The place was small and a little cluttered with sketches and books, but I wanted to create a space where we could just be. No pressure, no rehearsed conversations in French or English. Just us. I cooked dinner, a simple risotto I'd been trying to perfect, and we ate by candlelight, the soft flickering shadows dancing on the walls. As we talked about everything and nothing, I felt that familiar warmth settle in my chest, the kind that tells you this is where you belong. Later, we moved to the couch, our legs tangled as the city outside quieted down. Alex rested his head on my shoulder, and I could feel his steady breath against my skin. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Like maybe the future wasn't so scary after all. But then, he lifted his head and looked at me, eyes serious. "Mike, I'm scared." I swallowed hard, heart aching. "Me too." "I don't want to lose you," he said softly, "but I don't know how to make this work with the distance." I nodded, understanding more than he could say. Long distance was daunting. We'd only just started this thing, and already the miles between us threatened to pull it apart. "We'll figure it out," I promised. We're not exactly new to learning new languages, right? Maybe love is just another one we haven't mastered yet. He smiled, the tension easing a little. "You always find a way to make me laugh, even when things feel heavy." That night, we stayed up late, talking about what we wanted, not just in terms of geography, but in life. We shared fears about being alone, hopes for the future, and those little things that make a relationship ours. Favorite movies, silly inside jokes, the way we both hated the same song that kept playing on the radio. The next morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, Alex leaned over and kissed me gently. "Promise me something? Anything. Promise that no matter what happens, we'll be honest with each other. No pretending or hiding." I took his hand, feeling the truth in his words. "I promise." The weeks that followed were a blend of moments that felt like forever and others that slipped away too fast. We still met whenever we could, exploring new corners of Paris and stealing kisses in quiet parks. But the reality of the move was looming, and every goodbye felt heavier. One afternoon, we sat on a bench near the Luxembourg Gardens, the spring blossoms in full bloom around us. Alex was unusually quiet, watching the petals drift in the breeze. "I got the job offer," he said finally, voice tinged with both excitement and hesitation. "That's amazing," I said, trying to smile. "Yeah, but it means I'll be moving in a few weeks." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I know." We sat there, the silence filled with unspoken questions. How do you hold on to something when the world wants to pull it apart? How do you say goodbye without really saying it? That night, we met at our favorite café, the one where it all started. We talked about plans, visits, calls, the possibility of me coming to Lyon. It wasn't easy, but we were both determined to try. As we walked along the Seine afterward, our hands found each other, fingers interlacing like a lifeline. "Do you think this can work?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Alex looked at me, eyes steady. "I want it to. I'll fight for it." And right then, under the Paris sky, I believed him. The days leading up to his move were a whirlwind. We packed and planned, laughed and cried. On his last night in Paris, we sat on the rooftop of my building, the city lights stretching out like a sea of stars. "I'm going to miss this," Alex said, voice thick with emotion. "Me too," I admitted. "But this isn't the end." He smiled, leaning in to kiss me one last time before the move. "No, it's just the beginning." When the taxi pulled away the next morning, leaving him behind a blur of fading taillights, I felt a mix of sadness and hope. Our story was far from over. We were two guys learning to speak a new language, one of trust, patience, and love. And as I watched the Seine flow beneath my window, I know that sometimes the most important conversations happen in the silences between words. We're still figuring it out, one step at a time. But with Alex, I'm ready for whatever comes next. The first week without Alex in Paris was weird, to say the least. I kept catching myself reaching for my phone to send him a message, or waiting for his text to pop up, only to remember he was hundreds of kilometers away now, starting this new chapter in Lyon. It was like a quiet void had settled into my days, even though we'd promised to keep talking, to make this distance thing work. Our video calls became a lifeline. We'd managed to find pockets of time between work, life, and the time difference, just enough for a quick check-in. or a longer chat when we both could. Sometimes, we'd speak in French, stumbling over words but laughing through the mistakes. Other times, we'd switch to English, trading stories about our days, our worries, and our hopes. It was familiar, yet everything felt different now. The physical part of us was missing. The warmth of hands held, the brush of lips, the silent understanding and shared glances. One night, about 2 weeks in, we had a call that stretched long after we both should have gone to bed. I was sitting on my small balcony, the Paris skyline twinkling around me, and Alex was backlit by the soft glow of his desk lamp in Lyon. The conversation started light, talk of the city, favorite cafes, but then it veered into something more raw. "Mike," he said quietly, looking down at his hands, "I'm scared. I don't want this distance to change us. I don't want to lose what we have." I swallowed the lump in my throat, feeling the same fear gnawing at me. I'm scared too, but maybe this is just another language we have to learn, one that takes time and patience. He smiled faintly, but the worry in his eyes never quite left. "I hate that I can't just reach out and hold you when I need to." "Me too," I admitted, my fingers curling into a fist around my phone. "But when we do get to see each other, it'll mean even more." There was a silence after that, filled with things neither of us dared say. I could almost feel the distance between us pressing against the screen. "Promise me something," Alex said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "Anything. Promise that no matter what, we'll keep trying, that we won't let fear win." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I promise." That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that love was messy. It wasn't the neat, predictable thing I'd imagined. It was full of doubts and distance and moments of loneliness. But it was also worth fighting for. Over the next few weeks, we found our rhythm. We sent voice notes when calls weren't possible, Alex's French accent slipping through as he read poems or songs he liked. I'd respond with sketches or little video clips of Paris streets, trying to share pieces of my world with him. Sometimes, we'd watch the same movie on our separate screens, commenting and laughing as if we were side by side. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when the time zones messed up our schedules, when work drained all our energy, or when the silence between calls stretched too long and the doubts crept in. One particularly tough day, I was sitting in my favorite café, swirling a cup of espresso, when Alex called unexpectedly. His voice was tense and I could hear the frustration. "Mike, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm failing at this." "At us," he said, running a hand through his hair. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my own nerves. "Hey, it's okay. We're both figuring this out. No one gets it right all the time, but I hate feeling so far away from you," he confessed. "Me too. But maybe that just means we care enough to be scared," I said, trying to inject some lightness. He chuckled softly, the tension easing a bit. "You're good at languages, huh?" "Not all of them," I teased. "But I'm learning." That conversation felt like a turning point. We were admitting the hard stuff, the doubts and fears, but also the hope beneath it all. A few weeks later, I surprised Alex with a visit. I booked a train ticket to Lyon, keeping it a secret until the last minute. When I showed up at his apartment, watching him open the door and see me standing there, it was like time paused. His eyes widened, then filled with something I hadn't expected. Pure, unfiltered joy. We spent that weekend wandering Lyon's streets, sharing meals at tiny bistros, and catching up on all the missed moments. The physical closeness was intoxicating. Holding hands as we explored the city, quiet kisses in the rain, the simple comfort of falling asleep next to each other. But even then, the reality was there. We talked about what came next, how to balance our lives, jobs, and this growing relationship stretched across cities. "I don't want to lose this," Alex said one night, his voice low as we sat on his balcony watching the city lights. "You won't," I assured him, squeezing his hand. "We're in this together." That weekend was a breath of fresh air, a reminder that love wasn't about perfect timing or easy circumstances. It was about showing up, even when it was hard. Back in Paris, after I returned, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Distance was still a challenge, but now I knew we could handle it. We weren't just language partners or long-distance lovers. We were a team, building something that didn't need perfect words to exist. Looking back, I realized that love is its own language. Sometimes messy, sometimes confusing, but always worth learning. And with Alex, every day is a lesson I'm glad to take. After that visit to Lyon, things settled into a rhythm that felt less like surviving and more like living. We still had our ups and downs, the missed calls, the moments when distance made everything feel heavier, but we were building something that felt steady, something real. A few months later, Alex surprised me again. This time, he showed up in Paris, suitcase in hand, eyes full of that same nervous hope I'd come to recognize. We met under the soft glow of the street lamp near my apartment, and for a moment, the city around us faded away. "I want to try this," he said simply, voice steady. "Not just the visits or the calls. I want to be here with you." I smiled, feeling that warmth spread through me, the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. "I want that too." We took it slow, figuring out how to merge our lives in a city that was ours now. Alex found work that let him stay, and I kept learning about French, about love, about the messy, beautiful way two people can grow together. One evening, as spring turned to summer, we sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. Alex reached over and took my hand, fingers weaving together. "Remember when we started? Just partners trying to fix our broken French?" I laughed softly. "Yeah, I had no idea it would turn into this." He smiled, his eyes quiet but full. Neither did I. But I'm glad it did. We sat there in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes with knowing someone deeply. Love, I realized, is less about perfect words and more about the spaces in between, the glances, the touches, the steady presence when words fail. With Alex, I'd found a language I never expected to speak, but now couldn't imagine living without. And maybe that's the best lesson of all.